All right, everybody. I hope you're doing well tonight. Today, we're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine. We've spent all this weekend and today talking about Latin America and the revolutions in Latin America. Well, what about the United States? What role does the United States play in the rest of the world? So, this is kind of the first time that with the Monroe Doctrine that the United States really gets involved in international affairs. We've had our own spats with Britain in obviously our American Revolution and in War of 1812. But now the United States is extending her influence and extending her power elsewhere. So here's what Latin America looks like in the 1820s. In the 1820s, it's just not Haiti and Venezuela that are independent, but a lot of other Latin American nations have become independent as well, and they've gained their own freedom. Now, the problem with this is that European countries are still going to try to reconquer them. Remember, Portugal and Spain were the main countries that had colonized Latin America, or really America south of Mexico. And so Americans were worried that, hey, they're going to come back in. And Latin Americans were worried that they're going to come back in and they're going to take back over and restate their claim to their possessions that they lost. And so America said, you know what? The USA wanted not Great Britain, but the European powers to stay out. And they actually worked with Great Britain to create this doctrine, okay, that becomes known as the Monroe Doctrine. And so basically, the USA wants Europe to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. Okay, any involvement in the Western Hemisphere will be seen as an act of aggression. And President James Monroe in 1823, in his annual State of the Union address to Congress, makes a statement on this that eventually becomes called the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, and so let's talk about what the Monroe Doctrine says. Okay, and it says the American continents, by free and independent condition, which they have assumed and maintained, are henceforth not to be considered as subject for future colonization by European powers. So, in this speech from 1823, in front of Congress, James Monroe goes out and he says, look, Europe, stay out. Get out. They are free. Not only does he say that they are free because they earn the right to be free, he's basically saying that the United States has their back. Any involvement by European powers, any step in by European powers to Latin America will be seen as an act of aggression or an act of war. And America, the United States, has your back. Now, the United States is basically saying, hey, we're the big brother here. We're going to be the protector of the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to be the guys that really come and that really help out our Latin American neighbors. Okay, so here's what it means. One, the United States acknowledges that Latin American countries are independent. And that's really important because once a country declares itself independent or to be a country, that's all well and good. But until another country actually says, yes, you are a country, it doesn't really mean anything. Taiwan claims to be a separate entity or a separate country from China. But the rest of the world, some say it is, some say it's not. That's disputed. Okay, so it's not actually, in some circles, an actual separate country. The USA recognizes it, but others don't. Okay, it also says that any interference, like I said earlier, by Europe in the Latin America will be seen as an act of war. And Europeans are just coming out of a long strain of war. Remember the Napoleonic Wars, and in fact, yeah, they're just coming out of those, so they don't want to go back into that. And last but not leastly, this is the American influence over this, or I'm sorry, there's one more after this. This is the American influence saying, hey, we're stepping out of our little hemisphere, our bubble, or our bubble in North America, and we're stepping out and we're going to protect Latin America too. So it's our first involvement on a world stage and having a real foreign policy, which other than just stay out. Okay, and it says, yes, Latin America, your revolutions have legitimacy. And what legitimacy means is that you have the real power or the real authority to rule or govern. Instead, it means you guys are real things. Because the United States, which had beaten Britain in the War of 1812 and in the American Revolution, is becoming a stronger nation because the United States and Britain recognizes their independence. It gives the Latin American countries some legitimacy to the rest of Europe to go, hey, these are actual real countries. So what does this actually mean? So let's take a look for just a brief second at some political cartoons, and you can see some images here that are pretty familiar. Obviously, you see Uncle Sam here. You notice where his feet are stretching across the two continents, and you see the big stick there, the Monroe Doctrine. Now, political cartoons are really important, and here's why. Because as the Monroe Doctrine comes out in 1823, there are some instances where in newspapers and mass media, cartoonists start to use this as a way to communicate ideas. And so this is what we're beginning to see. See, here we have another Uncle Sam symbol. Okay, we'll talk about what these two guys represent tomorrow in class. But you see that Uncle Sam is drawing a line in the sand. Think about what that means and what that symbol is. And that line in the sand is the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, and last but not least is kind of my favorite. I like this one. Keep off. It says, no trespassing, America for Americans. Uncle Sam, and you've got the picture of Uncle Sam here, kind of dressed a little bit differently, but still looks the same in the face. He's got his striped pants, and he's protecting some folks over here. Think about who those might represent. And he's got his gun and his bayonet there as well. All right. Well, that's a brief discussion of the Monroe Doctrine and what it means for America, for the United States, and for Latin America. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow.